Page 66, June 22nd. We sat in the room where I usually serve tea, only this time I was on a chair and my mother sat on the sofa and we all sipped masala chai while Mr. Bashir talked to Ami. Begum Nasim and her husband sat with us. Your brother Rubel was not very cooperative, Mr. Bashir said to Ami after everyone had been introduced and given tea. He swore he had nothing to do with the kidnapping, but I was not convinced of his innocence, especially since he did tell me the names of the smugglers. And he gave me their descriptions, and I know of them. What will happen to Umar? Tariq Salim asked. Most likely they will train him to ride camels, he said. They may or may not give him a helmet. He may or may not fall off. The truth is many of these children die or are badly injured. Those who survive are often turned out once they are too big to ride, and then they are picked up for illegal immigrants and are put in jail. There they can stay indefinitely. The children who are rescued, and I have rescued many, often have been away from home so long that they don't remember who their parents are. They don't even remember their own language. Ami started to cry. Begum Nasim put her arm around Ami's shoulders. I held her hand. Is there anything we can do? Tariq Salim asked. I'm returning to the peninsula in a few days, he said. My wife and I are helping to establish a child jockey rehabilitation center there. I will look for Umar. If I find him or anyone I think might be him, I will take a photograph of him and have it faxed to you. My mother looked over at Begum Nasim. She had no idea what Bashir was talking about. I must admit, I was not quite sure either. I will give you my work fax number, Tariq Salim said. Good, Mr. Bashir said. Other than that, you can only wait. The sooner we find him, the better. It is against the law to use such young children as jockeys, but it still happens. Some trainers look for a small, older boy whom they can use for show when the authorities come around. At that point, Mr. Bashir looked over at me. If you had a boy about Nadira's size, he said, we could smuggle him in as one of the camel jockeys. He'd have a better chance of finding your son. That was when I first got the idea, Umar. You may have already guessed what it is, but I won't write it down until I am certain because it could get me killed. It could also save your life. June 23rd. My cheeks were burning all day, not from a fever. It was like when I was first scarred. My whole body ached and trembled as though my spirit didn't quite fit in it anymore. I felt that way again today. Mayun was upon us. Noor's relations poured into the house like bright yellow flowers streaming out of a tea kettle instead of masala chai. Mostly women, Noor's cousins. I could hear them teasing her for getting married in June. Why do you always have to be different? When Duri came into the room, the women screamed for him to leave. Ami and I served the women lunch, tea, snacks, tea again, desserts. I have never seen people eat so much. They sang and sewed and put yellow paste uptan on Noor. I didn't get to see all of it because I was busy cooking and waiting on people. Ami told me that Noor would not have to do much for the next few days besides be paraded around in different outfits. Relatives would keep her company, feed her, entertain her. Was your wedding like this? I asked our mother. It was a much simpler version of this, Ami said, but it was very beautiful. Somewhere in the middle of the day, Ami took me aside to say that Salik's father had inquired about marital status. I hope you told him I wasn't interested, I whispered. He didn't ask whether you were interested, Ami said. He must have asked about the scar, I said. He and Salik did not want to know about the scar, Ami said, but he said it was his responsibility as his father to find out. I felt like I was going to throw up, Umar. I didn't want to think of any of this. I wanted you to come home. I did not want some old man trying to arrange a marriage between his son and me, a son who was probably being pushed into it. Ami, why are we talking about this now? I asked our mother. We have so much to do, and I want to figure out how to get Umar home, not how to get married. I told him it was an honor scar. I said your brother had been falsely accused, so the men of the village came after you. They did not take your virtue because you struggled heroically, but they did scar you. He thanked me and went on his way. I wanted to scream. I felt like I could not breathe, like I was in a village again. Did you tell him about my other scars? I asked. The one below my left breast, the one on my belly, the other one on my back. He does not need to know such things, Ami said. Did you tell him about the scar on my heart? Shh, I didn't know you would be so upset. I thought you would be excited. Come, we will speak of this later. Later. Our mother did not understand. I had to go outside and take a deep breath. It was hot today. That was why people usually did not get married in June. I went back inside and served Noor and the women. Begum Nasim asked me if I was well. I nodded. I could not speak. I could not tell her I felt ill, lost. I felt as if though I was back in that village having pieces of my flesh carved away from my body. As it turned dark, I had to go outside again. I could not stand to be inside with all the perfume and the aromas and laughter. I was angrier than I'd ever been in my life, Umar, furious. I ran over to the tiny house and leaned against it. It was then that I saw Salik up on the ladder, hanging lights. I ran over to him. You had to send your father to find out what happened to me? I shouted. Salik came down the ladder. I'm sorry, what are you talking about? Your father asked my mother about the scar, about what happened in the village. Salik shook his head and looked at his hands. I did not ask him to do that. So you are not interested? You do not want to marry the scarred woman? I told my father I liked you, he said. I didn't know how to proceed correctly. You liked me? Yes, I wanted to hear the rest of the story. And so now you know because your father asked, are you still interested? That wasn't the story I was interested in. You didn't answer my question. My father said that you were attacked in the village because your brother had been falsely accused, he said. There is no dishonor in that. I laughed. I felt like I was watching myself, just as I had that day in the village when it all happened. Yes, my mother tells people, when she must, that the men of the village came after me, this tiny 12-year-old girl, but I was able to fight them off. I was brave and I was honorable and I saved my virtue, and they were so angry they carved a moon on my face. But there's more. There is so much more. They carved me up here, I pointed to the place beneath my breast, and here, my belly. Oh, and let's not forget my back. I moved closer to Salik and he stepped away. I was 12 years old, I said. I was whispering now. 12 years old. They were men, dressed in white, that kind of sparkling white you only see in the desert. It's all lit up, that white, and they came after me. They didn't even have to run. One of them caught my arm and jerked me toward him. I struggled. They laughed, but I could see that they were angry. They stripped my little body, and they took turns hurting my poor naked body, one after another. They crumpled me into dust, and the desert wind blew me away. When they were finished, they took out their knives and left a mark on me, the father, the two brothers, and the holy man. He left one on my cheek. That is the story. That is the rest of the story. I had never told anyone that before, ever, even myself. I looked Salik straight in the eyes, as I had never looked at any man besides Baba, and he looked back, only he was crying. I turned away from him and vomited. I will get your mother, he said. No, I said, falling to my knees. Some water. I lay on the grass on my side until he returned. Then I sat up and took the glass from him. He sat beside me on the grass as I drank the water. What can I do, he asked. I handed the empty glass back to him and said, leave me alone. Salik hesitated, but then got up and left. I waited several minutes before I returned to the house. I was careful not to let anyone see me while I looked around for scissors. I slipped them into my pocket and went to find our mother. I have to run an errand with Begum Nassim early tomorrow morning, I told her. I'll sleep inside with Fatima so I won't wake you. All right, daughter, she said. You look tired. Why don't you get some rest now? It's been a long day. I nodded, then hurried away and into the tiny house. I leaned over Ami's hand mirror, slipped off my scarf, grabbed a bunch of hair, and began cutting. I didn't even cry, Umar. I was not sad. I was numb. I felt like a whirlwind. Yes, that was it. I felt as though the pieces of dust that had been me were coalescing into a whirlwind of intention, and my intention was to find my little brother and bring him home. June 24th. Soon my hair was short and sticking out all over, just like a boy's. I carefully braided the hair I had shorn and hid it in the tiny house. I tried on Duri's old clothes until I found some that fit. Then I took them off again and sewed pockets into the side of the tunic, one for your book and one for mine. I wrapped tea leaves along with some whole cloves and cinnamon sticks in paper and put them in a pouch. I wrapped several dates and dropped them into the pouch too. I put it and a water skein around my neck. Then I dressed in Duri's old clothes and I dropped a few coins I had saved into his pockets. I put my clothes over his and fitted my scarf more tightly than usual around my head and face to hide my short hair. I hid Duri's shoes and hat beneath my clothes as I hurried into the big house. My old room was empty, so I lay on my rug on the floor, closed my eyes, and pretended to sleep. Once I actually fell asleep. I awakened just after dawn. Fatima slept nearby. I heard no sounds of people, so I was certain I was the first awake. I hurriedly wrote our mother a note. It said, "Don't worry, Ami, I am safe. I will bring Umar home. With great affection, your daughter Nadira." I woke up Fatima and pressed the note into her hand. "Give this to my mother only if I do not return by nightfall," I said. She sleepily agreed. I hurried out to the back, looked around, then crouched by the trash cans and took off my clothes. Remember, Duri's clothes were underneath. I put on his shoes and hat and threw my clothes in the trash, and then I hurried away. I had memorized the address of the Children's Trust. I walked to a bus stop that was not far from Begum Nassim's house. Other people stood waiting. Too, I was so nervous, Umar. What if someone said something? What would happen to me? What would happen to you? I kept touching my scarfless head. It felt odd. A man stared at me for a long time. I've never had that happen before. I almost ran away, but then I realized he was looking at my scar. The bus came and I asked the driver how to get to the Children's Trust. He just yelled, "Get on or get off." Someone tugged on my arm. I jumped down off the bus and an old man told me to wait for the next bus. So I did. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears. I got on the bus with the old man. He even told me when to get off. As the bus pulled away, I stood looking around for a long while before I spotted the Children's Trust building, and I ran across the street and hurried into the old building. It smelled damp, like it does everywhere during monsoon season. I was surprised to find Mr. Bashir sitting at a paper-strewn desk in a small room where 3 of the stalls were covered by bookshelves. Yes, he asked, looking up at me. I'm here about Umar, the kidnapped boy, I said. And who are you? I had not thought of what name to use. I almost said Ali Baba or Sinbad, but instead I blurted out, I am Ali Akbar. I'm Umar's cousin. You can't be Rubal's son, he said. No, another brother, but my father is dead. My auntie said you were looking for a boy about my size to go and help rescue the boys. Bashir got up from his desk and came over to where I was standing. You're skinny, he said. They might take you, even though you are too old. How old are you? How old should I be? He laughed. The law says jockeys should all be over 14 years of age, although I have never seen a jockey older than 10. I'm 15, I said. Why are you so small and your voice so high? There was trouble with my birth, I said. He nodded. These things happen, but I can't send a boy to do this. Bashir leaned against his desk. It could be dangerous. I want to bring my cousin home, I said. I'm really 18 years old, but most people don't believe that. Still, it was a bad idea. Please, my aunt is a widow. She needs her son. How did you get that scar, he asked. Someone insulted my cousin Nadira, I said. I protected her. She was unharmed. So, you know how to take care of yourself then, he asked. The conditions are brutal at the camps. They beat the boys, starve them, make them work all the time. There is sexual abuse. They might not even take you to the same place where they took your cousin. I have to find my cousin. I have to bring him home. He's all my aunt has left. Well, I can't sanction this, but I will tell you, we know where the men are who took your cousin. Does that mean Umar is still there? Or here? No, these men just find the boys, Bashir said. Someone else takes them away. You mustn't try to find out about your cousin from them. Just see if they're looking for anyone your age. I doubt anything will come of it. Bashir handed me directions to where he thought the men might be. He also gave me his card and his phone numbers on it, as well as the address of the rehabilitation center on the peninsula. As I started to leave, Bashir said, I don't think this is a good idea. I should have never mentioned it. Please promise me that you will go home to your aunt without looking for these men. I will be all right, I said. Don't worry about me. I left and walked freely through the streets as I never had before, and no one noticed me. I got lost twice and had to stop and ask for someone for directions, but I soon found the street and saw 2 men who fit the description of your kidnappers, sitting outside a restaurant drinking tea. I walked up to them. Hello, I said. I'm Ali Akbar, and I'd like to be a camel kid. Umar, I thought they were going to strike me dead right there. One of them jumped up and grabbed my clothes and dragged me away. The other followed me and kept shouting, Keep it down, not so much noise. They took me into an alleyway and pushed me to the ground. Who are you that you want to die so young? I'm sorry, sir, I said. I'm an orphan and need work. My Uncle Rubel sent me. Your uncle ought to be more careful, the shorter man said. I stood slowly and brushed off my clothes. You're too old, the rough man said, but you are light. Uncle Rubel said you needed older camel kids, I said, small ones and strong, and I'm very strong, and I've ridden a camel before. The men looked at each other. I had ridden a camel once at a park Baba took us to. All I remembered was that the camel stank, but it seemed to like me. It kept trying to bite the other children waiting in line. I thought Rubel had changed his mind, the short man said. He came looking for that other boy a few days ago. That was before he knew I wanted to go, too, I said. Lying came more easily to me than I thought it would. He didn't tell us anything about the other boy, the rough man said. The money doesn't go to him this time, I said. It goes to my Aunt Bibi Mariam. I can give you her address. Yes, the rough one said. As it happens, we've got papers for an older kid. Will you send me to the same place as my cousin, I asked. It would be good to be around family. Of course, the short one said. Be back here in an hour. I felt I was guided on this day, Umar. I had found my way to your kidnappers, and they had accepted me. You would be in my arms soon. I was certain of it. I waited not far from that spot, hidden until the hour was done, and an old van pulled up to the 2 men. I got up and went to the van. The door slid open, and I saw it was crowded with young boys about your age, their dirty cheeks tear-stained. One had his thumb in his mouth. Get in, the rough one told me. The man at the wheel turned around and glanced at me, then looked away again. I got into the van. It stayed idling in the same spot for many minutes. The gasoline fumes wafted through the open door, and several of the boys coughed. I could not see, but I could hear the rough man and the short man talking. Did your parents die too? One of the boys asked me. No talking, the driver shouted. I smiled at the boy but said nothing. I thought about grabbing 1 or 2 of the 10 or more boys stuffed into that van and saving them, perhaps. Jumping out of the van and running. But I probably couldn't have gotten myself away, let alone them, so I stayed where I was. my heart thumping inside my chest. Then I heard the rough one talking with someone out of my view. "Ah, your nephew is here," he said. "My nephew?" It was Rubel's voice. I leaned over and pulled the door shut. "Who said that you could do that?" yelled the driver. "It stinks," I said. I tried to wiggle back away from the door, hoping against hope that Uncle Rubel would not see me. "You said my nephew was gone," I heard Uncle Rubel say. "Another one, Ali Akbar, I think he called himself." The driver beeped the horn. "Say goodbye," the rough man said. The van door slid open. Uncle Rubel stood less than arm's length away from me. I put my head down. "Hey, you, show some respect," the rough one said. "Say goodbye to your uncle here." I looked up. The man dropped a small bag into my uncle's hand. "He wants it to go to his Aunt Bibi Mariam. Makes no difference to me." Rubel looked at me. His eyes opened wide and then narrowed. If he told the men who I was certain I would not see the next day. And why wouldn't he tell? Because he would have to return the money. I looked him straight in the eyes. "Have a safe trip, nephew," Rubel said, tossing the bag from one hand to another. Then he laughed. A moment later, the door slid shut again, and the van load of boys and me raced away. I felt as though I could breathe again, despite the stink in the van. A couple of the boys threw up as the driver whipped the van around one corner after another. I yelled at him to open the window, and he told me to shut up. Finally, he stopped the van. Someone opened the door, and 2 new men hurried us out of the vehicle and into an empty building. I'm in that building now, in a room with 20 other people. I miss Ami and our tiny house. I miss the smell of jasmine. I wish I could see the rest of Noor's wedding, but I know that I will be with you soon, Umar, and that fact keeps me going.